New York's Attorney General just shut down two of the biggest fantasy sports betting sites around. He says it's illegal gambling. But why can you bet on the horses or go to a casino but not have a fantasy football team? Then, Shelley Silver's corruption trial is exposing the culture of Albany and whether all the money changing hands is just business as usual or illegal. And sexting scandals, they're hitting several schools, including one in our area. Should a kid who sends a picture of him or herself get prosecuted and be labeled a sex offender? Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. We're going to look at those questions and more over the next 60 minutes. But before we get to all the legal cases we'll talk about, I wanted to honor our vets on this Veterans Day, and I echo the sentiments I know of all the folks at the table with me. Now, towns throughout our area are holding ceremonies to pay tribute to those who served in our armed forces. President Obama visiting Arlington National Cemetery, and he also laid a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier, and also he thanked our vets.
What has always made America great, what has always made us exceptional, are the patriots who generation after generation dedicate themselves to building a nation that is stronger, freer, a little more perfect. On this day and every day, we thank you.
Just two sidebars. Tomorrow we'll have a conversation with Senator Gillibrand about the treatment of vets, and that's certainly been a question here as care relating to the VA. And also, there will be tomorrow at the White House one of the most somber and also impressive occasions, and that is the awarding of the Congressional Medal of Honor, and one will be honored tomorrow, and it will not be posthumously the Hero Live, and we'll have that for you tomorrow on RFL. All right, but let's switch gears now. As I mentioned, New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman has dealt a major blow to two of the top fantasy sports sites. He's ordered FanDuel and DraftKings to stop taking bets from New York residents, issuing the following statement, quote, "It is clear that DraftKings and FanDuel are the leaders of a massive multi-billion-dollar scheme intended to evade the law and fleece sports fans across the country," end quote. Now, the two sites say they'll fight the ruling as what they're doing is perfectly legal. So it all begs the question here, what's skill, what's gambling? Why is betting at the track, for that matter, or at a casino legal, but, as I said, making a fantasy sports team and being part of one of these groups here illegal? Let's get to our legal panel now to weigh in. Jimmy Kasuris. Jim's a criminal defense attorney in Manhattan. He sits on the board of directors of the New York City Criminal Bar Association, frequently lecturing at New York Law School and the bar associations in both Queens and New York City, and sometimes in England when he feels up to it. Doug Von Ois, founding partner of Carson Von Ois, focusing on corporate misconduct. We're going to talk about class action suits this hour, so Doug will get into this. And by the way, selected by the Legal 500 as one of the most influential trial lawyers in the nation. Ooh, the rest of you say that, all right? Mayo Bartlett, by far the brains of this outfit, attorney at the law offices of Mayo Bartlett PLLC and former chief of the Bias Crimes Unit at the Westchester County DA's office. We'll talk about his time at that office. Tomorrow we'll be talking to Jeanine Pirro, who's got a very controversial book out, his old boss. We'll talk about that this hour. And Brad Gersman, attorney, political consultant, and founding partner of Gotham Government Relations. And with the Shelley Silver case, I'll be very curious to what Brad's got to say. But let's start off with FanDuel. And I got a basic question, Jimmy. I can go to the Empire Casino here pretty soon. I'm going to have 3 or 4 more casinos throughout New York State if I want to play blackjack, craps, whatever I want to do. I want to go play the ponies. I can do that too. But I can't play fantasy sports because those are games of skill and this is gambling. For the life of me, I don't know where the line starts and stops. Can you clean it up or clear it up for me and the audience?
Those aren't games of skill. They're gambling, but they've been legalized and they're regulated. So the ponies and the casinos, they're just legalized gambling. That's what they are. It's not games, they're not skill. What Mr. Schneiderman is saying is that fantasy sports is gambling because he thinks he can prove that chance is a material factor in fantasy sports. So the definition of
But
gambling,
help me out, though.
Sure.
If I knew that the full horse was going to win here, I'd be making a lot of money. A lot of people lose money at the track. More people lose than win. Isn't by definition that chance too?
It is, but it's legalized chance. It's gambling.
So you're saying that basically this is complete semantics or totally discretion. To one man, one skill. To the other man, it's gambling.
No. What I'm saying is this. The ponies, casinos, that is gambling that has been legalized and it's regulated. What happened here, and this is a complicated issue, fantasy sports was specifically excluded from the definition of gambling in 2006 under federal law. They relied on that and they created this multi-billion-dollar industry in reliance of that ruling. So you've got a federal law that exempted fantasy sports from the definition of gambling, and now you've got Mr. Schneiderman and many other states saying, from a state perspective, it is gambling, it's not legal, you can't do it anymore.
It does seem arbitrary. I get where Jimmy's coming from, but the perversity of this is, Doug, you talk to FanDuel or DraftKings, they're like, please regulate us. We'll pay taxes, we'll do whatever. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. They just want to stay alive. So the premise that one's regulated and one isn't, they're willing to be regulated. They're eager in a perverse way, probably the only people in this country that want to be regulated because they know how this ends. It does seem arbitrary that what skill, what isn't. Somebody made the analogy earlier today. If the two of you played poker, and I know he does, right? And Brad plays a lot and you're playing your first hand, he's got more skill than you do, Jimmy, too, right? But why isn't that? That's considered a skill. Like if I cover football and I know a lot more than Mayo, who's playing the game for the first time, I have more skill than him. It just seems so arbitrary what's skill and what's chance.
I completely agree with you. You sing it to the
It is
choir.
gambling.
I don't understand the difference, quite frankly. When I read over it and read over the regulations, I don't understand the distinctions they're made. You could make these same arguments about people buying and selling stocks. I mean, you know, is it skill? Is it luck? I mean, it's a completely arbitrary and I think capricious ruling to do this.
And Brad, he's talking about, I heard the AG goes on to say, well, because there's a public health component to this, they create addictions, there's also economic hazards to
Well,
those.
this is gambling.
That's about everything.
It is gambling.
Richard, this is gambling, okay? This is gambling, it's luck, it's chance, however, whatever word you want to put to it. So it is gambling. Every other form of gambling that's been legalized has to be legislated as such, okay? And you saw the casino gambling in New York State, and whether the Native Americans had a grasp on it entirely, or other private entities could open up. And if they could, the governor just went through tremendous pains with the legislature determining how many would open and where. Okay, so you have to go through that process. That's what the Attorney General is saying, is if you do want to do this in New York, you must go through that legislative process.
Now, you know Albany very well, Brad. Isn't this just a dance to basically get to a second step of this, which is
oh yeah, they want the
regulators.
taxes, they want the
Regulators
money,
and tax it and put the
but
revenue
there's
in the
no
state
question.
coffers.
But you still need to go through. You can't just open up for business, then get slapped in the hand and say, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Now put my name in as, or this business in as a regulated
Yeah, but
industry."
Brad, they didn't do that. See, that's the problem. And I do think that this is, look, I agree it's gambling. It's absolutely gambling. But in 2006...
Then they need to get the free pass to do it.
I get it, but in 2006 they got the free pass. Maybe it's because they paid for it through, whatever lobbying they did, but they got the free pass. The Unlawful Internet Gambling Act clearly exempts fantasy sports from the definition of gambling. It's not like they just said...
This is going to be a great state versus federal law conflict of conflict of laws.
You look, the marijuana dispensaries in Colorado, a state that has legalized them, are violating federal law every single day. So,
Very true.
I don't know if Mr. Schneiderman is just trying to figure out a way to get tax dollars, because let me ask you this, doesn't he get tax dollars? They operate in New York. They're taxed.
Where were they
This could be
before
a way to
this
say
became-
you're done. You're out. You can't do
They've
this.
already offered to say, we're open to the
Well,
premise.
they want that, Rich.
Right.
The reason why is because they want a stabilized business. And a lot of businesses, they want to get themselves regulated because that gets them acknowledged and that gets their name on the
I
docket.
disagree. Look at the pharmaceutical industry. Every single thing you see marketed has side effects that are worse than what you're taking it for. Okay, so that's regulated, but it's going to cause you 3 different cancers and sudden death. But take it, and you have a smile.
It's a bit of an overstatement, but
well,
all right.
well, if you watch them, that's what it actually says.
Right.
And when you stop and look at this, It's all about money. They weren't interested in this before it became a billion
course
dollar,
it is. It's
billion
business,
dollar
right.
industry, and it
But
was
how
on the
do
map.
they make more money here? They're getting their tax dollars.
Well, yeah, but they're going to get their tax dollars and they're going to get more money from them
I
by
have to
trying to
say,
regulate them.
I
So
think
really,
this is a way to shut them down.
well, I also think that you have to
Well,
wonder, why is your Attorney General's office going after this when
Oh,
there's
it's
so
gonna
many
shut them
important
down.
things
Well,
that
wait,
need
let's,
to be
let's bring
addressed?
it to where they're obviously going to appeal, and this will have a court. And talk about a fascinating case. Forget about what's happening in Foley Square at the Silver. Imagine you're going to have people testifying. Yeah, I got skill, or it's total luck here. I believe the thing that might really cripple this is if they can prove that players or the guys in the medical team of the NFL teams, or you got agents or whatever that have inside information about this. But again, do you know who some of the principal equity holders
Oh,
are?
yeah.
You got Jerry Jones and Kraft for the Cowboys and the Patriots owners.
This is
They
a
have
great
equity
idea,
stakes.
But what you can prove this. You can go to Empire City and you know that there's corruption there, at least there has been in the past, and you know that there were relatives of people who worked there who just happened to win all the jackpots. So that's not happening with FanDuel. You know, you're not going to say because you are
We had one case.
related to a member of FanDuel that the 49ers are going to beat the Seahawks.
Except there was already one case where, and this is really what sparked this whole thing, an employee ended up being a recurring winner, and there was wonders as to whether or not
Then you
he should-
investigate that
But that was
person,
investigated.
and you
Yeah.
investigated,
And it
that's
was
all.
learned that he disseminated the information after he won. So it
Okay,
was
let me get
clearly-
this real quick. I'll go around the table. I'll start with you, Mayo. 2 years from now, where are we with sports betting?
2 years from now, we're right where we are, except they're paying more money to the state.
2 years from now, this is still, they're toiling away up in Albany, deciding whether or not they're going to pass this. After multiple hearings on it, this thing is not a short-term fix. It needs a legislative fix for them to be able to operate in New York.
I hope people are betting if they want to bet. It's their money.
2 years from now, if there's litigation, the litigation is continuing, but there may be an application for a stay because they acted in good faith. It was exempted under federal law, and there may be a stay until it's resolved.
To be continued. All right, we want to get you involved in our conversation. Head over to Facebook and Twitter and sound off on our question here tonight. Fantasy sports, you think it's gambling or a game of skill? All right, coming up, we know that Shelley Silver collected millions of dollars in legal fees. We also know there's very little oversight of the money the former speaker was handling. But does that all add up to corruption, or was that just a way of doing business in the state capitol?